What if that nagging feeling in the back of your neck was real? What if those hands reaching out from the dark that you believed were there were there? What if the monster in the basement really existed? And what if there was really something under the bed? Would you have the courage to face your fears?
Hello, brave souls. If you've been listening to this channel for long enough, you know that this channel started with creepypastas. So we're going to go back a little bit, but we're going to have a zombie twist on it. So this is a zombie story with a bit of a creepypasta twist. Hope you guys enjoy it. The broadcast signal intrusion. I need to tell someone about what happened 3 months ago. I've been carrying this alone, but I can't anymore. The nightmares won't stop, and I keep seeing them in crowds, in reflections, in the corner of my eye. Maybe writing this down will help. Maybe someone will believe. My name is Marcus Chen, and I worked as a broadcast engineer for KWTV Channel 7 in Oklahoma City. It was a decent job, quiet most of the time. I handled the technical side of transmissions, made sure our signal stayed clear, and our equipment didn't fail during the news or primetime shows. Nothing glamorous, but it paid the bills and let me work mostly alone in the station's transmission facility, about 20 miles outside the city. The facility itself was pretty isolated. Just a squat, concrete building surrounded by transmission towers and satellite dishes. During my night shifts, I'd be the only person there for miles. I liked the solitude. It gave me time to think, to work on personal projects, to enjoy the strange peace that comes with being responsible for beaming television signals to thousands of homes across central Oklahoma. That changed on October 13th. I was running diagnostics on our main transmitter around 2:30 a.m. when the first anomaly appeared. First, I thought it was just interference. We'd get occasional signal bleed from other stations, atmospheric disturbances, that sort of thing. This was different. Instead of our late-night movie broadcast, static filled the screen for exactly 17 seconds. Then, clear as day, I saw a man standing in what looked like a hospital corridor. He was wearing scrubs. They were torn and stained with something dark. His face was pale, almost gray. His eyes were completely black. Not like his pupils were dilated, but like someone had filled his eye sockets with ink. He stood perfectly still, staring directly into the camera, for maybe 3 seconds before our regular programming resumed. I immediately checked our incoming feeds. Everything looked normal on our end. Called the network, thinking maybe they'd had some kind of technical glitch during their overnight programming, but they insisted their signal had been clean all night. When I described what I'd seen, the technician on duty laughed and suggested I cut back on the energy drinks. But I knew what I saw. I'd been doing this job for 8 years, and I could tell the difference between a technical error and actual broadcast content. That man, that thing in the hospital corridor, it had been real footage of something. I started recording everything after that night. The intrusions happened irregularly at first. Sometimes 3 or 4 nights would pass without incident. Then I'd get hit with 2 or 3 in a single shift. They always lasted exactly 17 seconds. They always replaced whatever was supposed to be broadcasting at that moment. Local commercials, network programming, even emergency alert tests. The signal would override everything. The content varied, but it was always disturbing. I saw empty hospital rooms with beds that had clearly been slept in recently, their sheets twisted and stained. I saw parking garages where cars sat with their doors hanging open, personal belongings scattered on the asphalt. I saw residential streets where front doors stood ajar and children's toys lay abandoned on the sidewalk. And I saw the people. They appeared in every broadcast, sometimes just 1 or 2, sometimes groups of them. They all had that same gray pallor, those same black eyes. Moved wrong, too slow, and too fast. Like they were adjusting to bodies that didn't quite fit anymore. In one transmission, I watched a woman in a blood-stained wedding dress crawl across the floor of what looked like a church. Her movements jerky, her head tilted at an angle that should have been impossible. The worst part was how they looked at the camera. They always knew it was there. They would stop whatever they were doing and stare directly into the lens with those empty black eyes, as if they could see through the broadcast signal and directly into the transmission facility where I sat watching. I tried to trace the source of the signal, but it was unlike anything I'd encountered. The metadata showed it was coming from our own transmitter, which was impossible. I ran every diagnostic I could think of, replaced components, even had our parent company send out their best engineers to check the system. Everything tested normal. That's when I realized the timestamps were wrong. Each intrusion was labeled with the broadcast time, but when I cross-referenced them with our actual transmission logs, they didn't match. The timestamp showed dates that were still weeks in the future. At first, I thought it was just a software glitch. The pattern was too consistent. Every single anomalous broadcast was timestamped for a date that hadn't happened yet. November 3rd appeared most frequently. I became obsessed with that date. I started a countdown, marking off days on my calendar like a prisoner waiting for release. I couldn't shake the feeling of whatever happened in these broadcasts. Whatever had turned these people into the gray-skinned, black-eyed things I kept seeing was going to happen on November 3rd. As the date approached, the broadcasts became more frequent and more disturbing. I saw hospitals filled with motionless figures lying in beds, connected to machines that beeped steadily in empty rooms. I saw city streets where cars had crashed into storefronts, their drivers slumped over steering wheels. I saw what looked like news studios, where anchors sat at their desks, staring blankly into cameras that no longer recording. On November 1st, I saw my own transmission facility. The broadcast showed our building from the outside. The same squat concrete structure surrounded by towers that I'd worked in for years. Something was wrong with the image. The parking lot was filled with abandoned cars. Several of the transmission towers had collapsed. Dark stains covered the concrete walls, and every window had been shattered. Then the camera moved inside. I watched in horror as I traveled through corridors I walked every day, past equipment I maintained, into the very control room where I sat watching. The room was destroyed. Control panels had been ripped apart, cables hung from the ceiling like vines, and the floor was covered with broken glass and dried blood. In my chair, my actual chair, sat one of them. Wore my clothes, my KWTV uniform shirt and jeans, but its skin had that same gray pallor. And when it turned to look at the camera, I saw those terrible black eyes. It smiled with my face, and I could see its teeth that had been filed to points. The thing that looked like me held up a hand to the camera. Written across its palm, in what looked like dried blood, were the words, "See you soon, Marcus." I ran that night. I didn't even shut down the equipment properly. I just grabbed my keys and drove straight home. I called in sick for the next 2 days, too petrified to return to the facility. Couldn't stop thinking about that final timestamp. November 3rd, 2:47 a.m. On November 2nd, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know if what I'd seen had actually happened. I drove back to the facility around midnight, my hand shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. Everything looked normal when I arrived. The tower stood straight and intact. The parking lot was empty except for my car, and all the windows were whole. I let myself into the building and made my way to the control room, half expecting to find my gray-skinned doppelganger waiting for me. The room was exactly as I'd left it. Equipment hummed normally. Monitors displayed their usual readouts. My chair sat empty in the main console. I checked the clock. 12:47 a.m. Exactly 2 hours until the timestamp from the final broadcast. Should have left then. I should have gotten back in my car and driven as far as possible. Instead, I sat down at my console and waited. The broadcast started immediately. Every few minutes, another 17-second intrusion would interrupt our signal. I saw scenes of chaos and horror from places I didn't recognize. Collapsed buildings, burning cars, hospitals where the emergency lighting cast everything in a sickly red glow. And always, those gray figures with those black eyes, moving through the destruction like sleepwalkers. At 2:45 a.m., our signal went dead. The monitors went black. The equipment stopped humming, and even the emergency lighting failed. The only sound was my ragged breathing and the distant hum of the transmission towers outside. Then, at exactly 2:47 a.m., everything came back online. It wasn't our signal anymore. The main monitor showed a live feed of the control room, the exact view from where a camera would be if someone had mounted one on the wall behind me. I could see myself sitting at the console, staring at the screen in horror. But there was something else in the image, something the camera could see that I couldn't. Standing directly behind my chair was one of them. It had the same gray skin, the same black eyes as all the others. This one was different. It was wearing a broadcast engineer's uniform like mine, but the fabric looked old and rotten, as if it had been buried for months. Its name tag read Marcus Chen. I spun around in my chair, but there was nothing there. The room was empty. But when I looked back at the monitor, the thing was still visible on screen, standing behind where I sat. It raised one decomposing hand and pointed directly at the camera. At me. The screen went black again, and when it came back online, it was showing our regular programming, a rerun of some sitcom from the 90s. Everything appeared normal. The equipment readings were stable. The signal was clean, and according to our logs, there had been no interruption in service. But I knew better. I quit the next morning. I told my supervisor I was having health problems and needed to take indefinite leave. I couldn't bring myself to explain the real reason. How could I tell anyone that I'd been watching broadcasts from a future where something terrible had happened, where people had become something else, something hungry and wrong? That was 3 months ago. Since then, I've been monitoring news reports, watching for any sign that what I saw might be starting to happen. There have been isolated incidents, a few unexplained deaths in hospitals, some reports of people acting strangely before disappearing, but nothing that could make the national news, nothing that would make people pay attention. I know it's coming. I tried to convince myself that it was all stress-induced hallucinations, that maybe I really did need to cut back on the energy drinks and get sleep. But then I'll be walking through a crowd and catch a glimpse of gray skin out of the corner of my eye. I'll see someone standing too still, moving too wrong. And for just a moment, I'll catch sight of those terrible black eyes before they disappear into the crowd. They're here. They're waiting. And I think they're spreading. 2 weeks ago, my neighbor Mrs. Patterson stopped waving to me. I got my mail. She just stands at her window and stares. Her skin looks paler than it used to. When I saw her up close yesterday, I could swear her eyes were darker than they should be. Last week, the barista at my usual coffee shop moved differently. Too slow and then too fast. Like she was getting used to her body all over again. When she handed me my change, her fingers were cold as ice. I've been thinking about those timestamps again. The ones that showed dates in the future. What if they weren't predictions? What if they were instructions? What if somewhere, someone had been broadcasting a signal that doesn't just show what will happen, but makes it happen? What if it wasn't just watching the future? What if I was helping to create it? Keep thinking about that final broadcast. The one that showed the thing wearing my face, sitting in my chair. It knew my name. It was waiting for me. And now, 3 months later, I can't shake the feeling that it's still waiting. Sometimes, late at night, I catch myself staring into mirrors a little too long, checking my reflection for signs of change. My skin still has its normal color. My eyes are still brown. But I can feel something different underneath. Something cold and patient and hungry. I don't think I have much time left. If you're reading this, if you work in broadcasting or know of someone who does, watch for signal intrusions. 17 seconds of content that doesn't belong. Timestamps for days that haven't happened yet. If you see them, don't try to trace the source like I did. Don't wait around to see if they come true. Just run. And if you see me somewhere, if you recognize my name or my face from some missing persons report or news story, do me a favor. Don't look directly into my eyes. By then, they probably won't be brown anymore. By then, I probably won't be me. The signal is still out there. Still broadcasting. Still spreading. And November 3rd happens every year. I can hear them calling to me now, through the static between radio stations, through the white noise of dead television channels. They're telling me it's time to come home. Time to take my place in the control room. Time to help spread the signals to new markets, new territories, new victims. The broadcast must go on. The broadcast must grow. And we need more engineers. This account was found on Marcus Chen's laptop after he disappeared from his apartment on March 15th. His neighbors reported seeing him walk to his car around 2:47 a.m., moving in what they described as a strange, jerky way, like he was sleepwalking. His car was found 3 days later in the parking lot of KWTV's transmission facility. Doors open, keys still in the ignition. The facility itself showed no signs of disturbance, and according to station records, no one had accessed the building that night. Security footage from the facility's exterior cameras showed Marcus' car arriving at 2:45 a.m. The footage shows Marcus getting out of the car and walking toward the building, but he is not seen entering. At exactly 2:47 a.m., the cameras experienced what technicians described as 17 seconds of interference. When the cameras came back online, Marcus's car was in the parking lot, but Marcus himself was nowhere to be seen. KWTV reports no unusual broadcasts or signal intrusions during this time period. However, several viewers in the Oklahoma City area called the station on March 15th to report brief interruptions in their late-night programming. Exactly 17 seconds of static, followed by images of empty hospital corridors and abandoned city streets. Marcus Chen remains missing. If you have any information about his whereabouts, please contact local authorities. Do not approach him if you see him. Do not look directly into his eyes. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that story. I'm still a sucker for creepypasta style stories. And these are just fun to read, honestly, for me. It's like a nice fresh breath of air from the 12 hours of surviving the zombie apocalypse stories. But I hope you enjoyed. Come back next time for some more scary stories. And as always, remember to face your fears. You say bye?
Bye.
Bye, guys. Have a good night. Or day, or whatever time it is for you.